to be thrown with increased frequency now. So although there are these efforts to calm things down with the water cannon, that doesn't actually seem to be having much effect.
Jackie, we were just speaking just a moment ago to Catherine Ashton, the EU foreign policy chief, who told us that they were actually going into a meeting in just a moment about Egypt, and she called on Hosni Mubarak to hear the message of his people. But clearly that hasn't been the case. He has made some concessions in the last week or so, but the people want nothing more, nothing less rather, than him just standing down.
Well, that was certainly the very clear and unequivocal message coming from the people in Tahrir Square just 24 hours ago. But what we've seen now is this huge deployment onto the troops, onto the streets, of people delivering a very different message, people who were really taking the opposition slogans and turning them around. So whereas 24 hours ago we were hearing, "We want Mubarak to leave," the people who've been out on the streets today have been saying, "We want Mubarak to stay."
And you wonder where these people have been for the last week or so, that there's been demonstrations not just in Cairo but also in Alexandria, Suez and other Egyptian cities. You wonder why they're only coming out now.
I think the reason that they're only coming out now was because of the very negative response from the demonstrators about 18 hours ago to the speech by Hosni Mubarak. Hosni Mubarak offered what had been touted as a good solution, what had been touted as important compromises. He said that he would not stand for another term as president. He said he would stay on to help oversee the transition, reforms to the constitution, but he was not going to do what the protesters wanted, which was to leave now. He said, "I'm a military man. I don't just run away. I'm, on guard at the moment. This is my position. I'm not going to step down and renounce my responsibilities." That was the way that he was playing it. He made it quite clear that he wasn't going to step down. The protesters were not impressed at all with this offer not to run in the elections. We saw the reaction, shoes waved in the air, jeering and crowing from the crowd. I think the fact that so evidently the crowd on the square rejected the concessions, the solution offered by President Mubarak is the reason why we have now seen the backlash today. It started small. It started with groups of 20, 30 or so people. Then there were hundreds. Then there were thousands. And then maybe even 10,000. It's very significant, I think, that they've only come out now. They've only come out when, if you like, Mubarak played his last card. His last card that he was willing to play was, "I will step down at elections."
And also in his speech last night, Jackie, he played a lot on the spectre of anarchy. This is something that clearly will resonate among some Egyptians who fear that these continued demonstrations will only bring about more violence, and we're clearly seeing this today.
Well, yes, again, as you say, that was one of the tactics of President Mubarak's speech. He talked at length about the scenes of anarchy, security, mayhem. He spoke about the looters and the arsonists who had brought chaos to neighborhoods all over Cairo, and the general atmosphere of fear, uncertainty and suspicion that you find all around the streets, particularly after dark. And he portrayed himself as being the one who could restore order, end the mayhem, restore security. So the fact that the security situation has deteriorated significantly, it does serve his purpose rather conveniently, because it seems to prove the point that he was making in that speech less than 24 hours ago.
All right, Jackie, let's speak right now to one of the protesters who was in Tahrir Square today. And is he still in Tahrir Square? We'll ask him that in a moment. His name is Ali Abdel Wahab. Ali, thank you very much for speaking to us. Are you still in Tahrir Square? And just describe to us the scene around you.
No, I'm not in Tahrir Square anymore. I was there about a couple of hours ago, and I went all around Tahrir Square really, and it was the sights were awful. It was absolute mayhem on side streets leading into Tahrir Square.
So what exactly happened? How did the clashes start? You were there, you say. When did the violence break out exactly?
Well, when I arrived at sort of early afternoon, there were groups of pro-Mubarak supporters, and I must say they were some rather hard-looking types. And they were going towards the demonstration carrying sticks, carrying homemade swords, every sort of implement to cause harm. And then at a particular time, stones were starting to be thrown, and it looked to me as though the pro-Mubarak people were the ones who started throwing the stones, and the army did their level best. They tried to put two APCs between the protesters, between the various groups of protesters, and one of the army APCs was absolutely pelted with rocks.
Well, as you speak to us, we're watching the pictures there from earlier today on the right-hand side of your screen, just a second ago there, of those running street battles between the pro and anti-Mubarak supporters. On the left-hand side are the live pictures from Tahrir Square right now. You mentioned these pro-Mubarak supporters. How did they look like? Who were they? Were they men? Were they women and children among them? Or, just describe to us what they looked like.
I'd say it was a mixed group. There were people who looked definitely very, very thuggish, and there were people, I think, who feel that they blame the demonstrators for the fact that their livelihoods are in danger. And there are those. Now, those are the two distinct groups that I saw.
We've also heard reports that some of these supporters were carrying police ID cards. Did you see that at all?
I did not see that. I heard about it, but I did not see that. I also rode in a cab as I was sort of trying to circumvent and get back home with some friends. One of the taxi drivers told me that he had pro-Mubarak supporters in the cab who had actually received money. Whether that's true or not, I cannot confirm, but that's what the taxi driver said.
Just give us, you told me, Ali, that you've left Tahrir Square now. Just give us an idea of, how many people were still in the square as you left. Do you get a feeling that people are going to be staying there overnight again, or are they probably going to be perhaps scared by the events of today and decide to go back home and start protesting?
I think a lot of people are determined to stay. There are more people trying to reach Tahrir Square to support the protesters inside, and they are being prevented by club-wielding supporters of Mubarak. The taxi driver had a very interesting take and said that it could be possibly remnants of the NDP who have so much to lose that they are the ones actually promoting this, and it might not be Mubarak himself. It's an interesting take.
So how many, according to what you've seen, again, I know you weren't everywhere, but from what you saw, how many would you say were out there? How many pro-Mubarak supporters were out there today, compared to the anti-government demonstrators?
I'd have to say several thousand.
Okay.
Several thousand. It's very difficult to tell because they're coming in off side streets.
Sure.
So you'd need a bird's eye view really from one of the helicopters that's been circling overhead since the event started to be able to tell. But at each entrance into Tahrir Square, I'd say numbers would be hundreds, low thousands.
All right. Well, thank you very much for speaking to us, Ali Abdel Wahab, one of the anti-government demonstrators who was in Tahrir Square earlier, where again there's been some very dramatic scenes there with the clashes between pro and anti-Mubarak supporters. Several hundred people injured, according to the United Nations. Many feared dead as well. We don't have the exact number as of yet, but of course, as soon as we do, we'll bring it to you. Right now, let's get reaction. And there's been lots of reactions to these events in Cairo. Let's get reaction from the United States. Patty Culhane is in Washington, D.C. Patty, what are they saying there about these events today in Cairo?
I have to tell you, speaking to sources behind the scenes, this is exactly the day that the White House was worried about. We did see an official statement come out from White House Press Secretary Robert Gibbs saying that the president deplores and condemns the violence on the media and the peaceful demonstrators, and they went on to say they repeat their strong call for restraint. After staying on the sidelines pretty much since the beginning of the protest, we saw a definitive shift from the president. He came out and he made a statement. He said he reached out to President Mubarak, spoke for half an hour on the phone, and the readout we got from the administration officials afterwards is that it was a frank discussion, which is their way of saying that the president didn't mix words. He told President Mubarak that the time was now for an orderly transition. What they're saying behind the scenes is that he told President Mubarak, this simply can't wait. He needs to start thinking about leaving now. So it's apparent that President Mubarak is not listening to that call from President Obama. We haven't seen a shift in tone from the Egyptian president. So what can the U.S. do? Well, the President Obama did talk about the military military last night. He condemned them for their, or commended them for their professionalism, and at the same time said that he hopes that they will continue to work to make sure that these peaceful demonstrations can happen. Now, we do know that the U.S. government has spent tens of billions of dollars over the last decade to make sure that they have these military-to-military relationships. We do know that the Secretary of Defense,